We are trying to awaken you to the true consciousness of yourselves.
They're magnificent. They're works of art. They're so beautiful, and it just brings you back to this other time when the value of art and education was the most important thing. And that is what makes Timbuktu so special.
The city was founded around about 1100. It's claimed that at its height there were 11 or more universities in Timbuktu, but of course they weren't universities in the way we think of them. They were small gatherings of scholars with particular specialities, and they were critical centers of scholarship, learning, and the dissemination of information. The Timbuktu manuscripts, like manuscripts in other parts of West Africa, were primarily the property of individual families. And the families considered their collections of manuscripts to be part of their inheritance and their material well-being, if you will, part of their wealth.
What's inside those manuscripts is what's so valuable. I mean, in the 11th century, astronomers were charting the stars, and there was information about health and nutrition and the plants in the desert that should be used for certain diseases. And actually in Bushbea, I arrived and there was a woman that was ill, and the chief of the tribe was going through one of the manuscripts trying to find, a cure for her. It's incredible that they're still as relevant today as they were, hundreds of years ago.
The insights they provide are quite amazing. And one of the interesting things about the manuscripts is that they include a good number of writings by women, which is not what one would normally think of in a stereotypical way. The conditions in which the manuscripts are to be found varies enormously. In the first instance, there are hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, and very few have been examined as a basis for starting the translation and preservation projects. But a good number of them have been quite severely damaged by insects or by wear and tear, sand erosion, and bad handling.
A lot of families are reluctant to give up their manuscripts, so they're trying to preserve them themselves. There are some families that have just stored the manuscripts in trunks. Others they don't even have funding for trunks. They're just out there in these harsh elements, just stacked.
The translation of the Timbuktu manuscripts is a real challenge. Firstly, because there's so many of them and one needs to hone in on what can be feasibly done. Secondly, because the script that is used is an old Arabic script and not the same as the contemporary script. And thirdly, the use of language is very different than it is today, just as is true in French or English or Dutch or German. And so one needs very special people who can undertake the translation, who understand the language, who understand the script, and many of those people come, in fact, from East Africa, around the Sudan. So that the challenges are many, but the rewards are far greater.
The people that own the manuscripts view this restoration project with reverence. I mean, it's not lost on anybody how much knowledge is there. And the irony is that Timbuktu is really an impoverished place. A lot of that knowledge there in the manuscripts hasn't been passed on to the generations that live there now. And so I think that there's a real thirst for learning. People want to know what's in the manuscripts and they want them preserved.
Making this information available, making the knowledge available, goes a long way to correcting the idea firstly, that there has been no new knowledge generated in Africa, and secondly, that Africa has existed primarily on an oral and not a written tradition of scholarship. And these manuscripts show very clearly, as we hope others will in West and East Africa, and even as far down the east coast of Africa as northern Mozambique, that there has in fact been a long tradition of written scholarship and historical record-making throughout Africa.